All right, guys. So this story right here is probably one of the most fascinating stories that I've read in a long time. And the reason why is because we have one of the most conservative Supreme Court justices, Justice Clarence Thomas, basically calling to regulate tech companies like public utilities, right? And this is basically blasphemy, right? Blasphemy when it comes to the traditional conservative small government point of view, right? I'm just keeping it real. It is. However, I think that conservatives are starting to learn a hard lesson in regards to how the world is evolving, because we have been at the brunt of the big tech censorship battlefront, okay? And conservatives are now getting pushback from major corporations across the country who are now going woke. They are fighting against laws, right? Laws that have nothing to do with them, right? We're living in a whole new world. So let's read about why Justice Thomas is suggesting regulating tech platforms like utilities. Justice Clarence Thomas suggested Monday that tech platforms could be regulated like utilities, and what could be a major shift for services such as Facebook, Google, and Twitter. Thomas, one of the Supreme Court's most conservative voices, made his point in a concurrence submitted alongside a decision to vacate lower court's ruling involving former President Donald Trump's Twitter account. There is a fair argument that some digital platforms are sufficiently akin to common carriers or places of accommodation to be regulated in this manner, Thomas wrote. That's interesting. I actually agree with that. I do believe that even though these big tech companies, right, these social media platforms are private entities, they are practically public forums, in my opinion. Regulated online platforms like utilities would require fundamental changes to how tech platforms operate. Depending on the specific contours of such regulation, social media sites could be forced to alter or do away with many of the moderation standards they use to keep harassment, hate speech, and nudity off their platforms. That is the opposite of what many Democrats have been fighting for, which is more liability for platforms that host certain types of objectionable or illegal content. Remember, guys, I've showed you guys video of Democrats in Congress begging these big tech CEOs to censor speech they don't like in particular, right? And that's the issue here. That's the battle. Because not only do you have the woke mob, you have these advertisers who basically see the woke mob as their customers, right? And the Democrats who want to pander to the woke mob for votes, going to big tech and pressuring them to censor speech they don't like, mainly conservatives, okay? Twitter and Trump. The decision erased a federal appeals court ruling that Trump had violated the Constitution by blocking his critics from his Twitter account. The lower court had said Trump's move effectively excluded citizens from viewing a public forum in a violation of their First Amendment rights. The Supreme Court ordered the lower court to dismiss the case as moot now that Trump is no longer president. The action prevents the federal appeals court decision from serving as precedent for future cases. Thomas' concurrence signals the justice would be open to arguments that could require a fundamental change to how tech platforms function. While he agreed that Trump's Twitter account did resemble a constitutionally protected public forum, in some respects, it seems rather odd to say that something is a government forum when a private company has unrestricted authority to do away with it, he said, referencing Twitter's decision to remove Trump's account from the platform following the January 6th insurrection at the U.S. Capitol. Any control Mr. Trump exercised over the account greatly paled in comparison to Twitter's authority, dictated in its terms of service to remove the account at any time for any or no reason, Thomas wrote. Thomas said the solution to the unprecedented issues presented by the tech platforms could lie in doctrines that limit the right of a private company to exclude. It's not the first time he's indicated openness to the idea of upending the status quo of tech regulation. In an October filing, Thomas wrote that it behooves the court to determine the correct interpretation of Section 230, the law that protects tech platforms from being held liable for their users' posts or for how they choose to moderate and remove content. Thomas suggested the law had been too widely interpreted and that there is a reason to reconsider its application. And I definitely agree with that, right? I definitely think that these platforms, when they start to act like publishers, even though they don't have to, they're not required to, and they're giving legal protection to not do that. And when they start to actually do that, I think they are abusing Section 230. Okay? And when they start to do that, I definitely think at the very least it needs to be relooked at. Okay? Trump's Federal Communications Commission chair pointed to Thomas's statement in his decision to clarify the law, but that did not happen before the administration changed hands. Democrats hold a far different view on how the law should be revised, though they too are seeking changes. Thomas's concurrence Monday was the only one submitted alongside the action, which did not include an explanation from the majority. That could be an indication that Thomas's colleagues don't share his reasoning, especially since Thomas is known for holding views that deviate from the rest of the court. Thomas also discussed in his statement the vast reach of several large tech platforms over the flow of information and even books. He argued it doesn't necessarily matter if platforms like Amazon, Facebook, Twitter are not the only means to distribute speech, so long as the relative power to do so is unmatched. Quote, a person always could choose to avoid the toll bridge or train and instead swim the Charles River or hike the Oregon Trail, he wrote, but in assessing whether a company exercises substantial market power, what matters is whether the alternatives are comparable. For many of today's digital platforms, nothing is. All right, so Justice Thomas is essentially making an argument that at the very least, Section 230 needs to be looked at, right? And the interpretation needs to be narrow, which I agree with. But I don't agree with regulating big tech platforms like public utility. I do think that is probably unnecessary and a step too far, right? However, like I said, we are in a special situation where Democrats, aka politicians, aka lawmakers, aka people in power, aka the government, is telling these big tech companies to censor and limit freedom of speech. And I think that there definitely should probably be some intervention on that level, right? Should lawmakers be allowed to tell private companies how to moderate their content or to force them to do so, right? To pressure them to moderate certain content. I'm not sure how far that should go, right? Because on one hand, people can argue it's needed for the government to do that so that private companies don't just host dangerous content that they find is dangerous, right? For example, like, terrorist organizations or, other types of groups that, may be harmful. There's an argument to be made that, maybe the government should make sure that they don't do that. But there's also an argument to be made that the government can overextend their power and their reach in regards to that. And I will argue that that's actually what's happening right now. The Democrats have used the precedent of the government getting involved with these social media companies in regards to trying to regulate some of these dangerous groups, right? Or groups they define as dangerous. They've used that power and that precedence to try to now regulate speech that they don't like. And I think that that's something that we should probably take a closer look at, right? But like I said, I do disagree that these companies should be regulated like public utilities. I think that is a slippery road to government-owned social media, right? And that's also something you don't want, right? That's like China to a certain extent. And I guess another point in this video, guys, I want to bring up is that, we've seen conservatives / Republicans advocate for a lot of things that are not on a traditional conservative / Republican platform. We've seen Republicans give out stimulus checks, right? They did it twice. Now we're seeing Republicans threaten to take away people's tax breaks, right? For these big corporations over this Georgia voting law. We've seen Republicans like Josh Hawley suggest that these big tech companies should be broken up, right? And also to maybe take away the antitrust protections that Major League Baseball benefits from, right? This is a trust-busting position. Now, it's not on the modern-day conservative platform, but it used to be on a Republican platform back in the day. It used to be. And now you're seeing one of the most conservative judges on the court, if not the most conservative judge, advocate for making these private companies public utilities. The Republican Party is evolving, okay? And I'm just saying this, don't be surprised to see the Republican Party be forced to make some serious changes because they're going to undergo an identity crisis. Conservatives have now realized that maybe it may not be a good idea to give these corporations unlimited First Amendment rights. And this is happening because these companies who used to not be so woke, whose positions used to benefit conservatives, have now shifted politically to become woke, and now it's hurting conservatives. Now you're seeing some conservatives turn to positions that, some libertarians probably would hate. They would define as big government positions, right? And I think that that's just absolutely fascinating. Okay, I've explained to you guys my political speed limit hypothesis, and this kind of goes along with it. Lil Nas X was going too fast. Some people are going too fast. They're too progressive. Some conservatives are realizing that you can go too slow. That as the world evolves, more problems are created. And if you're going too slow, some of these problems that are created are going to negatively affect conservatives because traditional positions don't apply to the modern day world or the future, right? Things change. That's what's happening with big tech. And conservatives are realizing that it's probably not a good thing to go too slow either, right? Because if you go too slow, then you'll get left behind. And the woke corporate world has threatened to leave conservatives behind, which is forcing conservatives to reevaluate a lot of the traditional thought processes when it comes to the relationship between government and private industry. And like I said, guys, that is so fascinating. And it just shows that over time, these parties do evolve in terms of their views. They change with the times. I think that the Republican Party may be in for a new makeover, right? In which these woke corporations, because of their treatment of conservatives, right, the people, may force the Republican Party to think a little bit harder about whether or not they want to be as business friendly as they are versus just helping out regular people directly, right? I think that they're going to reevaluate that, okay? So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.